The champagne hadn't even lost its bubbles when he said it. "You're done here. Go home." Clayton Rourke didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The microphones, the camera flashes, the polished crowd all went still. I stood beside him, holding a glass I suddenly couldn't taste. Behind us, a banner stretched across the ballroom Halberg Strand and Rourke Industries $1 billion strong. I blinked once, steady. "Why?" He smiled, that politician's half-smile that means nothing. "Strategic shift," he said, though the words barely reached his lips. Then he turned to the audience and clapped. "Let's toast to the future." Applause followed thin, delayed, confused. My throat burned, but I said nothing. I'd spent 18 months negotiating every clause, every decimal, every late-night conference call that made this deal possible. I'd barely slept for days. I had built this merger from blueprint to signature, line by line. While he was still giving interviews about innovation, Clayton raised his glass higher. "To new leadership," he said. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone else looked away. Margaret Lynn, our CFO, caught my eye across the table. Her lips formed a single silent word. "Sorry." I lowered my glass. Am I being escorted out? Or should I show myself? Clayton didn't answer. He had already turned back to the cameras, his arm around the marketing chief. Security shifted uneasily at the edge of the crowd. I nodded to them. "It's fine. I can walk." Outside, the air was sharp, the Chicago wind slicing through my thin jacket. I kept walking until the noise of the ballroom was gone. My phone buzzed with notifications, press releases. Congratulations. Headlines using his name beside my work. I thought of the contract, 3,000 pages of clauses and contingencies, drafted under my direction, reviewed by hands less careful than mine. Somewhere deep inside, that document was the one line they had all missed. Section 8, subsection 4, B. I exhaled once, steadying my pulse. Tomorrow. They would understand exactly what strategic shift meant, and I kept walking toward the glass doors that no longer belonged to me. The guards were polite. They always are when the company fears headlines. "Ms. Keats, we'll need your badge," one said softly, as if lowering his voice might make the humiliation smaller. I handed it over. "You can call me Rowena." I told him, "You've earned it." He looked away. I'd seen him 100 mornings at the security desk, always the first to greet me with a coffee and a joke about the weather. Now he couldn't meet my eyes. We stepped into the long corridor of glass, the same one I'd helped design during the last headquarters expansion. Each panel reflected a version of me I barely recognized: calm, straight-backed, disposable. Employees stood frozen at their desks as I passed. No one spoke. The silence was worse than pity. "Ms. Keats." A voice called. It was Margaret Lynn, the CFO, standing in the doorway of her office. Her expression was tight, careful. "Can we?" She stopped, catching sight of the guards. "Never mind." I stopped anyway. "You could at least tell me how long you've known." Her jaw tensed. "This morning." He didn't consult me. She lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry." I nodded once. "Don't be. You'll need your distance for what comes next." Her eyes flicked up, confusion cutting through her guilt. "Rowena, don't do anything rash." "Rash." I smiled faintly. "No, I'm done with that. I'm thinking." One of the guards shifted his weight. "Ma'am, we should keep moving." "Of course," I said. At the elevator, I turned back for one last look. The office glittered behind the glass, all steel and order. It was supposed to be a monument to vision. I had built it believing permanence was real. The doors closed on Margaret's face, her lips forming the same word again. Silent, but clear. "Sorry." I adjusted my coat and stepped out into the wind, carrying nothing but the memory of a clause hidden deep inside a contract they'd never bothered to read. By the time I got home, the city was already fading into night. I dropped my coat over the arm of the couch. too tired to care where it landed. My phone buzzed once, twice, then went still. The sender's name made my stomach tighten. Margaret Lynn. The message was short, encrypted through the internal compliance app we'd both used during merger negotiations. He's asking for the payout schedule. I stared at the words, reading them twice. Then another line appeared. He wants the legacy transfer processed by morning. I typed back, for his family's trust account. A pause, then her reply blinked through, exactly that. $300 million. He's calling it a symbolic continuity gesture. His words, not mine. I sank into the chair, the air leaving my lungs all at once. Symbolic continuity. He was trying to drain the last piece of his father's empire before the ink on the merger had even dried. My fingers moved without thinking. Does he know the conditions of the release? The typing bubble pulsed for several seconds. Then, if he did, he wouldn't be rushing. I closed my eyes. The document came back to me in fragments, the endless meetings, the pages of revisions, the legal language I had crafted word by word. Buried deep in that contract, under Section 8, subsection 4B, was the very trap he was now sprinting toward. I typed one final message. Don't say anything. Not yet. Just stall. Margaret's response came quickly. I'll do what I can. Be careful, Rowena. He's angry. Angry, I murmured, setting the phone down. He hasn't even begun to be. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the radiator. I crossed to the small cabinet by my desk, unlocked it, and pulled out the heavy binder. 3,000 pages of clauses and signatures thudded against the wood. I opened it to the tab marked in blue. My own handwriting filled the margin beside it, 3 words I'd written long before any of them mattered. Value. Protection. Clause. The binder was heavier than I remembered. It smelled faintly of paper and metal, like the conference rooms where I'd spent the last year of my life. I turned to the tab marked in blue and found the section I had been thinking about since I walked out of that ballroom. Section 8, subsection 4, B Value Protection Clause. The language was dense, clinical, exactly as I'd written it. In recognition of the critical importance of strategic continuity during the initial 12-month integration period, any termination of listed personnel without demonstrable cause shall nullify the final legacy payment. The next sentence was the one no one had cared to read. All voided funds shall be immediately and irrevocably redirected to the Sterling Employee Pension and Performance Bonus Fund. My name was at the top of Appendix C. They had all signed it. The phone felt cold in my hand as I dialed David Chin. He picked up on the second ring. His voice clipped and awake. Rowena, it's late. You all right? I need you to listen carefully. I said, I'm reading from the final executed merger agreement, Section 8, subsection 4. B. He didn't interrupt. I read the clause word for word, my voice steady, almost detached. When I finished, there was a silence long enough to make me check the line. Then he let out a quiet whistle. You wrote that. Yes. Rowena, he said slowly. This isn't a clause. It's a guillotine. If he fired you, that payment is gone automatically. No appeals, no amendments. It's locked. I rubbed a thumb over the margin note beside my handwriting. It was meant as a safeguard, not revenge. Intent doesn't matter. Effect does, David said, and the effect is devastating for him. The weight in my chest began to shift, not lighter, just sharper. I closed the binder, each page pressing down like a verdict. Thank you, David, I said. That's all I needed to know. He hesitated. What are you going to do? I looked at the silent phone after he hung up. Nothing, I whispered. Not yet. By morning. The emails began. The first came from a junior associate at Kramer and Wolf, the firm Clayton always used when he wanted intimidation disguised as procedure. Per your separation terms, You are required to cooperate fully with our post-merger review. Failure to do so may be considered obstruction. I deleted it. An hour later, another message arrived, this one louder, written in the kind of legal aggression that bleeds arrogance. Your refusal to respond will force us to seek damages for breach of fiduciary duty. I let them pile up. By noon, there were 9. By 3 o'clock, Margaret called. Rowena, he's in my office. He's furious. He wants your files, your passwords, everything. He's threatening litigation. Then let him, I said. He hired Kramer and Wolf. She whispered. They're preparing a formal notice. You'll see it any minute. The email landed before she hung up. The subject line screamed, urgent, final demand for compliance. I opened it. The language was thick with threats, every paragraph a hammer. They accused me of negligence, of obstruction, of professional misconduct. At the bottom, in bold letters, it read, "You are hereby directed to respond by close of business today." I clicked reply all. My fingers didn't tremble. Gentlemen, please direct your attention to Section 8, Subsection 4B of the final executed merger agreement. Rowena Keats. I hit send. The message left my screen like a breath held too long. I watched the little paper airplane icon vanish into the ether, carrying $300 million of consequence behind it. Margaret texted 5 minutes later. What did you do? I reminded them what they signed. I wrote back. There was no reply after that, no follow-up, no demand, not even a courtesy receipt. The inbox went dead. Somewhere in the high glass towers above LaSalle Street, lawyers were reading, rereading, and realizing. I closed my laptop and poured a cup of coffee, the first one that tasted like victory. By evening, the city skyline glowed gold against the lake, and the news feeds were full of photos from the merger gala at the Wexler Hotel. Clayton Rourke, radiant in his tailored tuxedo, was playing the visionary again. Reporters called him the man who rebuilt Halberg Strand. I watched it all on my phone from my kitchen table. Margaret had been forced to attend part of the optics, part of the illusion. At 7:43, her first text arrived. He's giving a speech. I can't look at him. Another came seconds later. Reporters everywhere. He keeps saying seamless transition. I could almost hear the rehearsed charm in his voice, the champagne fizzing through his arrogance. Then, at 7:51, his lawyer just ran to him. He's gone pale. I straightened in my chair. My reply was only one word. When now? They're checking their phones. Something's wrong with the accounts. A photo followed grainy, taken in motion. Clayton stood frozen mid-toast, one hand still raised, eyes wide and unfocused. Around him, the crowd's smiles had stiffened into confusion. Another text. Compliance alert. Treasury flagged the legacy payout. Funds, frozen pending review. I exhaled slowly. Section 8, Subsection 4. I said under my breath. Margaret's final message came minutes later. He's trying to leave. Reporters are asking questions. No one's answering. On the muted live feed, I saw him force a laugh, set down the glass, and step away from the cameras. His wife followed 2 paces behind, her expression brittle. The music faltered. Conversations died mid-sentence. People shifted uncomfortably, the air thick with the scent of panic masked as perfume. Margaret texted once more, a single line that landed like a verdict. It's over. The board's calling an emergency session. I turned off the phone and sat in the dark, the city lights blinking through the window. Somewhere across Chicago, an empire built on ego had just cracked down the middle. Margaret called at 11:45. Her voice was low, urgent. They've convened in the main boardroom. Just him, the lawyers, the general counsel, and 4 directors. It's bad. Bad for who I asked. For him. She said. They just printed the clause. I heard the shuffle of papers on her end, a door closing, the hum of air conditioning that always filled that room after hours. Then faint voices, raised, clipped Clayton's among them. "You think this was an accident?" His tone was sharp, wild. "She planted it. She sabotaged this merger to someone cut him off." I recognized the calm precision of William Prescott, the board's chairman. "Mr. Rourke, the language is clear. You signed the agreement. Your father's legal team approved it." "That clause voids my family's payment," Clayton shouted. $300 million. "She buried it." Arthur Gaines, the general counsel, spoke next, his voice slow, deliberate. "It was not buried. It is properly indexed, clearly labeled under Section 8. Subsection 4, B. You initialed it on page 1242. A heavy silence followed. Then the sound of paper sliding across wood. Margaret whispered. They just handed him the signature page. I pictured it, the white sheet. His own handwriting at the bottom. Clayton's voice broke through again. "Thinner now. This is extortion. I was misled." Prescott's voice hardened. "You fired the architect of the merger, without cause. That action triggered the clause. The loss is yours alone." Margaret breathed into the phone, steady this time. "They're voting." I waited. 10 seconds, then 20. Finally. Her whisper, unanimous. The connection clicked once, then silence. A new message appeared a minute later. They read it. "You won." I set the phone down on the counter. The refrigerator hummed softly in the dark. Somewhere across the city, security guards were walking a man in a designer suit out of the same glass doors I'd walked through only a day earlier. I didn't smile. I simply listened to the quiet and let the sound of justice fill the room. The call came just after dawn. Margaret's voice was hoarse but steady. "The board wants to see you. Now." I hesitated. "You sure they mean me?" "They need you. Rowena. The market's bleeding." I arrived at the Halberg Strand Tower 30 minutes later. The lobby was nearly empty. No cameras, no music, no banners, just the echo of a company that had run out of confidence overnight. A young assistant met me at the elevator. He couldn't have been more than 25, his hands trembling as he handed me a badge. "They said you should go straight up, ma'am." The boardroom's waiting. When the doors opened, 12 faces turned toward me. The same men and women who had watched me escorted out less than 48 hours ago. Now they looked like survivors of a shipwreck. William Prescott, the chairman, gestured to the seat at the far end of the table. "Ms. Keats, thank you for coming. We're in crisis. The stock dropped 17 points overnight. Investor confidence is gone." Margaret sat 2 seats away, eyes tired but resolute. "The news is everywhere. They're calling it the Rourke Clause," Prescott continued. "We need a statement by market open. Something to assure our shareholders we're not collapsing." I took the pen lying before me and began to write. No meetings, no revisions, no committee approval, just one paragraph. When I finished, I read it aloud. "Halberg Strand Holdings confirms that the board has taken decisive action to preserve long-term stability. The merger remains intact. The company stands by the architect of the transaction, Ms. Rowena Keats, whose leadership will guide our integration strategy going forward." No one spoke for a moment. Then Harrison Doyle, the oldest director, said quietly, "That'll do it." Prescott nodded. "We'll release it under your name." Margaret looked at me across the table. "It's already climbing back," she said, checking her phone. "The market opened 5 minutes ago. It's moving." I stood, the room silent except for the tap of her keys. Let's make sure it stays that way. As I walked out, the glass walls reflected me again, but this time, no one looked away. The auditorium was packed. Hundreds of employees filled every seat, the air thick with unease and exhaustion. 2 days ago, they'd watched a man crowned as their savior. Now they waited for someone they barely knew to tell them what came next. I stepped onto the stage alone. The hum of quiet voices faded. I set my notes aside and spoke into the microphone. "My name is Rowena Keats," I began. "Some of you know me. Many of you only know my work. I led the merger that brought us here. And yes, I was also the person fired in the middle of the celebration." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd. It died quickly. "What you don't know," I continued, "is that the contract we signed contained one clause designed to protect this company's integrity. When leadership chose ego over responsibility, that clause was triggered." The room was silent now. I could see Margaret in the front row, hands clasped in her lap, watching me closely. "The $300 million payment intended for the Rourke family trust has been voided," I said clearly. "By law, that money will not leave this company." Murmurs spread surprise, disbelief, a rising wave of sound. I waited for it to settle. "It will go," I said, "where it was meant to go, to you. Every cent will be directed to employee pensions and performance bonuses, as written in the Value Protection Clause. This is not charity. It is restoration." For a moment, there was only stillness. Then someone began to clap. Another joined, then a dozen more. The sound gathered force until the entire hall was on its feet. Margaret wiped at her eyes. I looked down at the speech I hadn't needed and folded it quietly. When the noise finally began to fade, I spoke once more, softer this time. "We build our future by protecting what's earned, not by taking what was never ours." Then I stepped back, letting their voices fill the space where mine no longer needed to be. That night, I stayed late in the office. The floor was quiet, the kind of silence that follows a storm. My inbox was overflowing reporters, investors, congratulations written in the same polished tone that once carried pity. The phone rang close to midnight. The number was unfamiliar, but the name wasn't. "Richard Carraway, CEO of Latham & Rowe Industries, Chicago's other empire." "Rowena," he said smoothly. "You've had quite a week." "I've noticed," I replied. "I'll be direct," he continued. "My board wants you. Name your number. Double your current salary. Immediate control of mergers and acquisitions. No interference. We'll make you the highest paid executive in the city." His words were measured, but I could hear the hunger beneath them. He wanted what every man like him wanted the architect, not the blueprint. "That's generous," I said. "It's practical," he corrected. "You've proven yourself. You brought down a dynasty in 24 hours and stabilized another before the markets opened. I admire efficiency." I stood by the window, watching the frozen surface of Lake Michigan catch the city's light. "And if I say no, then you're wasting your prime," he said. "You've got leverage most people never dream of. Use it." I let the pause stretch until I could hear his breath. "Richard," I said finally. "I didn't do this to trade one crown for another." He chuckled. "Come on, everyone's for sale at the right price." "Not everyone," I said. "Not me." Silence. Then a small, polite click as the line disconnected. I closed the laptop and poured the last of the coffee into my cup. The city outside was still alive, red taillights threading through snow, towers blinking against the dark. The storm was over, but the air still hummed with its aftermath. I leaned against the window, the reflection of my own face looking back at me, steadier than before. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was the woman who built something worth surviving, and I had finally remembered who it belonged to.